Again, the polls close in California in about an hour. California voters deciding whether Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom should be recalled, and if so, who should replace him. MSNBC's special coverage begins here now as we wait for those first results to come in at the top of the hour. Our live coverage will continue throughout the night. That all starts now as we go to the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel, and we are ready to go with California coverage. Of course, there's another important election tonight, and that's the Boston mayor's primary race. We don't have any numbers on that to really report. We might have them much later tonight. But California, biggest state in the union, having this recall election, that is the election news of the night. That's what we're going to be on for at least for the first half hour. Depending on what we get, we won't be getting anything really on returns until 11 p.m. 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. California time. And as you say, as Steve Kornacki said, we're going to get a huge dump, a really huge dump of votes at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. And so we may know a lot very soon after the polls close.
Yeah, and California is obviously a gigantic state. And if it is not if it's not a blowout, if it is a close race, it is totally possible that California could take this count for weeks.
Yes.
I mean, they've got a full month to count if they need it. And people who mailed in their votes, they only have to be postmarked by today. They've got a week to get them in. If it is close, then it could take a very, very long time. If it is not close, what we get at 11 may be very, very important in terms of understanding how long this night's going to go.
I walked a half mile yesterday to put my ballot in a post office, and so California's not seeing my ballot for another, I don't know, 7 or 8 days. So so we know that one's not going to be counted.
Well, they
tonight.
better not call it before yours is in.
They're
I know
not counting that one tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Well, polls close in California at the end of this hour, and Republicans are already so convinced that Gavin Newsom is going to win the recall election tonight and remain governor of California that Republicans are already lying about the election being unfair. The leading Republican candidate for governor, Trump-supporting radio host Larry Elder, is already claiming fraud in the election and refusing to say that he will accept the results of the election. Of course, it doesn't matter whether the loser formally accepts the results of the election. NBC's Jacob Soboroff asked Governor Gavin Newsom about Larry Elder's refusal to accept the results of the election. Asked him about that today.
Look, I could care less what he does at the election. I'll accept the will of the voters no matter what it is. Period, full stop. The idea they're even playing around with this and vandalizing trust and confidence, that's consequential, and it has real impact across this country. We've got to push back, and that's why in California we need to send a powerful message. Hell no to these recalls and the cynicism and Trumpism and everything that's going on with voter suppression, attacking women's rights. This is a fundamental moment in American history.
Leading off our coverage tonight is MSNBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. Steve, less than an hour to polls close. What do we know so far?
Yeah, we've gotten, you can see them, I see on the bottom of the screen there, the exit polls. We're going to get another round of data that's going to refresh these exit polls probably about 40 minutes from now. But as you mentioned, everything really is leading into 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. California time, less than an hour from now. When this board behind me, you see we're set up to tally the results here on the recall, yes or no, across the state of California. This thing is going to light up, and it's going to light up quickly. Of course, California, a mail-in voting state, heavy mail-in voting state. People can vote today around the state, but millions of people do it by mail. Millions have already sent their ballots in. They can process the ballots ahead of time in just about every county in California in the first 10, 20, 30 minutes after polls close. They're going to release the mail votes that they've counted up so far. So what can we tell you in terms of what to look for when that clock ticks to 8 p.m. Pacific time, 11 p.m. on the East Coast? First of all, just a couple things to look for here in California. One is the big sort of population hub right down here in terms of the vote. Los Angeles County, 1/4 of the vote, 25% of the statewide vote will come from Los Angeles County alone. 10 million people in Los Angeles County, bigger than the state of New Jersey. Right south of that, Orange County, you got San Diego County, you got the Inland Empire right here, San Bernardino, Riverside County. together, more than half the vote is going to come out of where I've got circled right here on this map. More than half the vote's going to come out of here. The Bay Area, another big one to keep an eye on. The San Joaquin Valley, a couple other places here. But the population center, obviously, down here, Southern California and the Bay Area. And when we start looking through these counties, when these numbers start coming in, really about an hour from now, here's a rule of thumb to keep in mind. Let's take a look at Orange County here, for example. So Orange County, more than 3 million people there. This used to be a Republican bastion, but in the 2020 presidential election, you see here, Joe Biden carried Orange County. He won it by 9 points over Donald Trump. Now, this is true in Orange County, and it's going to be true in every county we show you tonight. Here's how to watch the results when they come in. We're going to show you the results over here, and then we're going to show you how it went in the Biden-Trump race. Look at this Trump number right here. Donald Trump, 44% of the vote in Orange County. For this recall to succeed statewide, the rule of thumb is this. The recall needs to be running about 16 points better in any given county than Donald Trump ran. It's how democratic the state is. That's the challenge for recall supporters. They got to convince Democrats, they got to convince Biden supporters to vote for this. So in a place like Orange County, the number to look for here is 60. Is the recall anywhere near 60%? If it were to hit 60, if it were to go over 60 in a place like Orange County, that bodes well for the recall passing statewide. If it's under 60, if it's significantly under 60, that bodes terribly for the recount statewide. And again, this is a rule of thumb we're going to be tracking in every county when those votes start to come in a little bit less than an hour from now. But the challenge, Lawrence, you know, again, Democratic state, Biden won it by nearly 30 points. I think you can see it on your screen right there. One of the questions that was asked in that exit poll today, do you approve or disapprove of Joe Biden's performance as president? The electorate voting today, according to the exit poll, Biden has a 56% approval rating with. So it's Biden supporters who would have to vote for this recall, a significant number of them, if it's going to pass. So that's what we're going to be doing county after county, less than an hour from now.
Steve Kornacki, it's going to be very difficult to maintain suspense about this outcome with what we're getting on the exit polls. Really appreciate you starting us off, Steve. And
Thanks.
We're joined now by Mayor Robert Garcia of Long Beach, California. Also with us, David Plouffe, former campaign manager and White House senior advisor to President Barack Obama. He's an MSNBC political analyst. And former Democratic Senator from California, Barbara Boxer. Let me start with you, Senator Boxer. You know this state so well. You have won statewide. You know what it's like to do that. This exit poll information about a 56% approval rate for Joe Biden among today's voters, people physically going to the polls today, seems to indicate this is a very, very strong electorate for Gavin Newsom.
It definitely sounds that way, but, you know, I think David is the one who is the numbers guy. But I'm just the person who was on the ballot a lot. And I want to point out that I lost my first race. And, Mayor, you're probably too young to have ever lost a race, I think. But this whole sore loser party thing is unbelievable. And I think what's really coming out of this election is more about the Republican Party in California than Gavin Newsom, who I think is solid, and I think it's going to be fine, is what I think. But the Republicans, you know, when they put up Arnold Schwarzenegger all those years ago, he was a mainstream Republican. And the leading candidate here is an extreme Republican. And it just says everything. If they can't suppress the vote, okay, then they cry foul if they lose. And that's what we're facing here in California, nationwide, the same thing.
Mayor Garcia, the Democrats had a very simple strategy going into this, which is simply vote no. The Democrats, led by the governor, didn't want any recognizable Democratic name in that list of 41 candidates as options to Gavin Newsom. And so there's really nothing on there except a couple of Republican names that people would recognize and then a bunch of others. And, of course, if Gavin Newsom wins this in a big, big way tonight, then that strategy looks solid and looks like the model that Democrats will have to use in the future, because you know this is not the end of Republican-driven recall campaigns in California.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think the governor and his team have done a great job with the strategy. We've learned from experience what happened the last time when there was another name on the ballot, another Democrat on the ballot. And so I think this was the right approach. And I think the governor is going to win. He's going to win with a good margin tonight. And we're going to get back to governing and taking on the pandemic. I think what's also happened is the governor has created, I think, a national model for Democrats for 2022. And that is that there is going to be a Larry Elder on the ballot everywhere. We already know that's the case. I mean, Donald Trump has created this whole other type of candidate, radically extreme misinformation, really appeals to the kind of worst in people, in my opinion. And we're going to see these folks on the ballot across the country. And so I think this model that we have, focusing on the pandemic, keeping people safe, being honest, focused on truth, is absolutely the way to victory and to win. It's going to be a great night here in California, and we're excited for the governor to just get back to work full time.
David, I normally don't like even being on TV in the hour before the polls are closing, because this is when you can be proven wrong so quickly after saying anything. But as I look at what today's exit polls are, knowing that every voter in California got a easily mailed-in ballot, the turnout challenge in this recall election seems to have been met by the mail-in system and by the voters who are literally turning out today. According to those exit polls, the Democratic turnout seems to have shown up today.
Well, Lawrence, I mean, for the Republicans to pull off an upset here. So, again, exit polls are even worse than normal polls. So let's caveat it all. But, if the electorate actually is Biden approval 56%, that means that, the turnout we've seen amongst early mail votes tracks that pretty well. And for the Republicans to have any chance, they'd probably have to win 20 to 25% of Democrats. So this was a tall order here. Lawrence, I'm really struck by what this means going forward, though. And I think Senator Boxer and Mayor Garcia make good points. So one, let's talk about, in California, we call them NPP, no party preferences, but let's, in other parts of the country, call them independents. 90% of independents in this state are vaccinated, and my guess is Newsom's going to win them at least 2/3, 1/3. I believe the Newsom campaign believes they're going to get maybe 20, 25% of Republicans in the Bay Area. So all around the country, there's vaccinated independents and Republicans who I think that you can make the Republicans pay a price for this. Secondly, let's talk about the last 24 hours. From Donald Trump to Larry Elder to the entire Fox News symphony, they're talking about the California results being rigged. You have Donald Trump now in the Woodward berth. There's excerpts out where he's trashing Kevin McCarthy. So what does this mean for next year? They're going to have to win the House back, win the Senate back. They're going to be reliant on irregular Republican voters who maybe only got involved because of Trump. And what they're going to hear is, you can't trust elections, they're rigged. Your vote doesn't matter. Oh, by the way, if you do deliver the House and Senate, it will be to McConnell and McCarthy, who are arch enemies of Trump. So this could be political malpractice of the highest order. And we'll even have to see today, the Republicans needed a massive election day turnout here in California to make up for the Democratic advantage in mail-in ballots. But what I think a lot of Republican voters heard in the last 2 or 3 days was, why bother? Because the election's rigged. It blows my mind as a former practitioner that you would create an environment where you make it harder for your people to turn out. And so we're going to learn a lot about what happened in California tonight and the days to come. I think it's incumbent on the Democratic Party to take the lessons out of California and not treat them as California specific. What can we learn from this to advantage ourselves in 2022? And I think there's a lot we can learn from this that's going to be beneficial.
Senator Boxer, Donald Trump made himself an issue in this race. Larry Elder made Donald Trump an issue in this race by embracing him so closely, as Larry Elder has done for years now. It's the Republicans can't get away from Donald Trump, whether they want to or not. Most of them do not want to get away from him. And in California, there's no word that can lose elections quicker than that word Trump.
No question about it. And I've said Larry Elder is Donald Trump on steroids. I mean, some of his stuff is even crazier. For example, he says his favorite minimum wage is zero. He says he could make the argument that slave owners should get reparations, or should have, after the Civil War, because their property was taken. I mean, this just turns my stomach. He said women women don't understand politics. And he may, as well as men. And he made that statement when California said the first two women from any state in the union to the United States Senate, and Nancy Pelosi was climbing the ladder of leadership towards speaker. So, you know, I could go on with all that. I don't want to spend my time doing it. But the reason I say we will learn more about the Republicans than we will about Gavin Newsom is because this is nuts. They have embraced Larry Elder. They had a list of, I don't know, 45 people. They had a couple of mainstream Republicans. There's no such thing anymore. They're just sore losers. They're off that right-wing cliff. They're going to fall off it in California, I predict. I hope.
Former California Senator Barbara Boxer, Mayor Robert Garcia, and David Plouffe, thank you all for starting off our discussion tonight. Really appreciate it. California Senator Alex Padilla will join us next.
The eyes of the nation, this is not hyperbole, the eyes of the nation on California is a decision you're about to make. Isn't this going to have a huge impact on California? It's going to reverberate around the nation.
That was President Biden in a speech we covered live here last night in his closing argument to voters in California, where the governor has the power to appoint a member of the United States Senate if a Senate seat becomes vacant. Democrats losing one seat would change the balance of power in the Senate. In January, California Governor Gavin Newsom appointed Alex Padilla to the open California Senate seat vacated by now Vice President Kamala Harris. Today, Senator Padilla was one of 8 Democratic senators who negotiated a revised voting rights bill. That bill would need the support of all 50 Democratic senators and the support of at least 10 Republican senators to clear a 60-vote threshold in the Senate. Senator Joe Manchin said that he is working to get those 10 Republican votes, but today Mitch McConnell said there will be no Republican votes for that bill. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Alex Padilla of California. He previously served as California's Secretary of State. Senator Padilla, first of all, I want to get your reaction to where things stand in the recall election tonight. The exit polls looking very strong for Governor Newsom.
Well, first and foremost, with my old Secretary of State hat on, voters in California, you have until 8 o'clock to get to a voting location, drop your ballot off. If you haven't returned it already, you're getting in line to be able to vote. Look, I think the polling seems to be consistent, and the people that I talk to in all parts of California, pretty sure this recall is going to be defeated, and defeated big, which is important. This recall was not just consequential for the direction of the future of California, but truly did have national implications. Can you imagine if the rest of the country saw California voters choose Trumpism as the new direction, as a consequence of Governor Newsom being bold in his leadership early in the pandemic? Would have been completely the wrong message, but Californians are seeing the light, they're seeing the truth, and they're voting the right way in a big way.
So you were in the room for this very important negotiation with Senator Joe Manchin and others to come to a new revised voting rights bill for the United States Senate to consider. But this bill, under the current rules, has to pass a 60-vote threshold to even be considered by the Senate. We now know, we didn't know this morning, we didn't know this when the bill was first announced, but we now know there will not be a single Republican vote for this bill. Senator Manchin went off in search of Republican votes earlier today. Now we know there will be none. What happens next for this bill?
Look, I think Senate Democrats are in agreement that this has to get done. It is about protecting our fundamental democracy, which we've seen under attack, not just from voter suppression laws in state houses across the country, but from the deadly insurrection of January 6th. And so, in good faith, try to work with our Republican colleagues who complained that the For the People Act was too broad, too comprehensive. Okay, we've put before them a focused, tailored bill that encompasses all the best practices, frankly, to maintain the integrity of our elections and facilitate voter participation. If they can't go for this, then we're coming back to that conversation about the rules of the Senate, abolish or reform the filibuster so that this can get done. The 2022 elections and all elections, frankly, are just too important.
Well, Senator Schumer said that he intends to bring up this bill very soon, possibly early next week. And he said that before there was any attempt by Joe Manchin to secure the Republican votes, and before the Republicans announced there will be absolutely no Republican votes. So it sounds like Senator Schumer is going to bring this to a vote, watch it get blocked on the 60-vote threshold by Republicans, and then presumably ask for a vote to overrule the chair on that ruling on the 60-vote threshold.
Look, it should come as no surprise. Earlier in the year, only a handful of Republicans could bring themselves to do the right thing on the impeachment trial of Donald Trump. Just a couple of months ago, not one Republican could bring themselves to vote to even have a discussion or a debate about voting rights on the floor of the Senate. And if they can't bring themselves to support this tailored, focused voting rights measure, then that should answer the question for anybody, any Senate Democrat, any American, about how genuine Republicans are about protecting your right to vote. They can't have it both ways. They can't come to the Senate and say we ought to protect the right to vote on a bipartisan basis, and then be complicit when Republican legislators in state house after state house are undermining the right to vote and access to the ballot. So if it means getting rid of the filibuster or getting it out of the way to preserve our right to vote, and that's what we're going to have to do.
Senator Manchin has said this year that there could be some modifications to the 60-vote threshold rule. Is it likely that Senator Manchin will vote for a modification to the 60-vote rule when it comes to voting rights legislation only, so that he can get this bill through with 50 Democratic votes plus the Vice President Harris's vote?
Lawrence, are you suggesting there's some Manchin tea leaves to be read here? I think he is providing that opening, short of abolishing the filibuster, a reform, a carve out. I've heard the term exemption of a filibuster, some way around the 60-vote threshold for something as fundamentally important as a right to vote. Anybody who wanted to give Republicans the benefit of the doubt that they were genuine in wanting to work with us on this, they've had their answer, and we just got it again.
California Senator Alex Padilla, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
And coming up, in a phone call with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff about preventing Donald Trump from using nuclear weapons when he was president, Speaker Nancy Pelosi said, quote, "I hope you can prevail in the insane snake pit of the Oval Office and the crazy family as well." We will have more on what was happening in that snake pit next. After the Trump mob's attack on the Capitol, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, and said, quote, "I hope you can prevail in the insane snake pit of the Oval Office and the crazy family as well. You'd think there'd been an intervention by now. The Republicans have blood on their hands, and everybody who enables him to do what he does has blood on their hands and the traumatic effect for our country. This man is a nut, and everybody knows it, and nobody will act upon it. We've been taken over by a dictator who used force against another branch of government, and he's still sitting there. He should have been arrested. He should have been arrested on the spot. He had a coup d'etat against us so he can stay in office. There should be some way to remove him." During the call, General Milley repeatedly said he agreed with Speaker Pelosi. General Milley promised the Speaker that he personally would block any attempt by Donald Trump to use nuclear weapons or launch any kind of military attack on another country in order to create a crisis that he would then try to use to keep himself in office. All of that is revealed in the new book, Peril, co-authored by Washington Post journalists Bob Woodward and Robert Costa. According to the book, 2 days after the attack on the Capitol, General Milley called his counterpart in the Chinese military to try to maintain calm between the two countries when it seemed so chaotic in Washington. General Milley said, quote, "We are 100% steady, everything's fine, but democracy can be sloppy sometimes." General Milley assured the Chinese general that Donald Trump would not attack China as a way of trying to hold on to power. According to the book, General Milley said this, quote, "General Lee, you and I have known each other for now 5 years. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise." Donald Trump issued a written statement tonight saying that if General Milley said that, he should be charged with a crime for, quote, telling China that he would be giving them notification of an attack. The book described General Milley convening a meeting with top military leaders to review a procedure for launching nuclear weapons. At that meeting, General Milley said, quote, "No matter what you are told, you do the procedure, you do the process, and I'm part of that procedure." Then he went around the room asking each officer for confirmation they understood, looking each in the eye. "Got it?" Milley asked. "Yes." "Yes, sir." "Got it?" he asked another. "Yes, sir." Milley considered it an oath. Joining us now are John Howland, NBC News and MSNBC national affairs analyst. He is host and executive producer of Showtime's The Circus and host of the Hell and High Water podcast from The Recount. Also with us, Maria Teresa Kumar, president and CEO of Voto Latino and an MSNBC contributor. And John, here is General Milley once again, a major source in a book telling about what it was like in the snake pit, as Nancy Pelosi calls it, with Donald Trump. General Milley, now the focus of Donald Trump's wrath again, with this statement tonight saying that if what he's saying in here he actually said, then General Milley should be charged with a crime. The Milley versus Trump battle continues.
Yeah, Lawrence, it's like a battle of an adult, not just an adult, but an adult who was supremely concerned, scared, terrified, petrified, mortified about the state of the country in the moments after the November election, and particularly in the moments after the January 6th insurrection. That adult trying to make sure that the child, and worse than child, the demented child in the White House would not wreak havoc or cause vengeance, wag dogs, whatever possibilities were running through Donald Trump's mind. I think that's how you're going to characterize it here. You've got someone who cared a lot about the country and someone who cared nothing about the country and only about himself. And Milley's story, as conveyed by this book vividly and other books that we've had in the last couple of months, has been very consistent throughout. And I will say, you have Trump now. The thing that Trump enjoyed most about that statement, Lawrence, is that he got to call General Milley dumbass in the statement, which is kind of just about a good illustration of why General Milley was so concerned about the state of affairs in that period. And I will say, once again, reading the accounts, we all now learn every time one of these stories comes out how much closer to the brink we were than we understood, and how much we owe people like General Milley and others, the few remaining adults in charge at that point, for having the country's best interest at heart and being there in case the worst happened.
Maria Teresa, according to Bob Woodward and Robert Costa's reporting, Mike Pence did the right thing on January 6th, which, by the way, was the only thing he could do. I'm not sure why anyone gets credit for doing the thing that's the only thing you're legally allowed to do, and we call that the right thing. But he did it only after desperately trying to find a way to do the wrong thing and help install Donald Trump in a false second term. There's a passage here about with Mike Pence speaking to former Vice President Dan Quayle, who was the last Republican vice president who had to, in effect, be part of the certification of his own ticket's loss of the re-election campaign. And so here's Dan Quayle telling Mike Pence, "Mike, you have no flexibility on this. None, zero, forget it. Put it away," Quayle said. Pence, he says, "I know, that's what I've been trying to tell Trump," Pence said, "but he really thinks he can." And there are other guys in there saying, "I've got this power." And Quayle interrupted and said, no, you don't, just stop it. Maria Teresa, one of the interesting investigative routes for the January 6th committee in the House is, who are the other guys? Who are the other people in the White House who Pence is referring to right there, who were saying that Mike Pence does have this power?
Well, I think first, before we go there, who would have thunk that it would be Dan Quayle to save our democracy, Lawrence? That was absolutely not on my bingo card at all. But in all seriousness, I think there's a lot of Republicans that have whispered behind closed doors, but at the end of the day, that actually came forward and said he had this authority. I would say that Ted Cruz was one of them. Anybody who voted against the certification that day of January 6th, those are the Republicans that behind closed doors on the congressional side were saying that the president had this authority. Then you also have more information in the book where it was that Pence knew that it was the wrong thing to do, but he was allowed himself to be bullied on perhaps what's going to be the most important day of his life. He left a legacy, but it was because he was pushed by a previous vice president who had done the exact same action to do the right thing. And to what you said, Lawrence, there is no congratulations for doing his job that is demanded by the Constitution. If anything, we should actually have a moment of pause that he even had to have a conscience through Dan Quayle to do the right thing.
John Hodman, you're in Los Angeles tonight. I'm assuming that Sunday night's episode of The Circus on Showtime will be all about the recall.
I wouldn't say necessarily all about the recall, Lawrence, but we'll have a decent chunk about it. I was out there with Joe Biden and Gavin Newsom and Eric Garcetti and Jamie Harrison, a bunch of other, the whole Democratic state, local, and to some extent national leadership in Long Beach last night. And you know, this is my home, as you know, my home state, Los Angeles, my home city. So I'm happy to be out here. But we are using the recall to get at some larger themes, talking about a lot of this backlash against the Biden administration's vax mandate. And the fact is that Larry Elder doing what he's doing right now, bringing the big lie to California, creating a slightly less big lie, but letting us know, putting us all on notice that this is now SOP for the GOP. We're going to be seeing in 2022, 2024, and beyond, if Republicans are losing, they're going to claim fraud, and that's another one of the unfortunate legacies of Donald Trump, and we're going to see it, I'm afraid, well, we've already seen it here, but we're going to see it, I think, in an even louder way tomorrow if Gavin Newsom prevails, as we now all expect he will.
John Heilman reporting from Los Angeles tonight. The Circus returns Sunday night to Showtime. Maria Teresa Kumar, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you both.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you. And coming up, it is rare for Donald Trump to speak without lying. It is even more rare for Donald Trump to stop telling a particular lie that he has already told. We'll show you the lie that Donald Trump said once and never again. The lie that even Donald Trump is afraid of repeating. That's next. Captain Patrick Brown ran into the North Tower of the World Trade Center on 9/11, leading his team of firefighters from Ladder Company 3. After the South Tower collapsed, the fire department ordered firefighters to evacuate the North Tower. In a recorded radio response to the order to evacuate the North Tower, Pat Brown said this: "This is the officer of Ladder Company 3. I refuse the order. I have too many burned people here with me, and I'm not leaving them." That is the kind of pain and loss and heroism that was being commemorated on Saturday at Ground Zero by President Biden and two former presidents, and thousands of the loved ones of people who lost their lives on 9/11. President George W. Bush joins the commemoration in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where Flight 93 was brought down by the heroic passengers who did not let the hijackers fly that plane to Washington, where it could have destroyed the Capitol or the White House. Donald Trump did not participate in any of the commemorations. He dropped by a fire station very close to his Manhattan home for a photo op with a few firefighters. He told a few jokes there before heading off to Florida for a payday on 9/11 as a commentator for a pay-per-view boxing match, which the New York Times described as, quote, 3 hours of Trump recalling different boxers he'd known and been friends with before two depressing top bouts, both over in the first round, each of which featured one washed-up fighter beating another. The man who claims to be a billionaire did that on 9/11 because he apparently thinks he needs the money. In the reports of Donald Trump's visit to the fire station near his home, it does not appear that he told the firefighters any of his usual lies about his experience on 9/11. He told a new one last week on one of the more obscure Trump-supporting TV networks.
Well, I was down there right after the event, and I brought a big crew of people down, and I helped. A lot of other people helped. Those first responders are very brave, and I'm telling you, we were hearing creaks. I've never forgotten it. There was, I think, the United States Steel Building, it was called at the time, and it's 50 stories tall. And we heard creaks. I said, that building's going to come down. And two big firemen grabbed me and grabbed other people, and they just moved out of that area. Never came down, but I never heard a noise like that.
No, he never heard a noise like that because that never happened. None of that happened. It's all a lie. He was not down there right after the event. He did not help. He did not hear any creaking building. What he did do after 9/11 was lie about contributing to charitable funds for the victims of 9/11. And Donald Trump told his worst lie about 9/11 when he was running for president in 2016.
How did he keep us safe when the World Trade Center came down? The world, excuse me, I lost hundreds of friends.
As soon as he said that during the South Carolina debate, I tweeted that that was a lie. I knew it was impossible that Donald Trump lost hundreds of friends on 9/11. Donald Trump was following my tweets closely in those days because I was just about the only member of the news media at that time who was calling his lies lies. He attacked me on Twitter, of course, but he paid attention to my tweets in those days, and so the next morning on Meet the Press, he changed his line about losing hundreds of friends on 9/11.
I was there. I lost many, many friends in that tragedy.
And as soon as he said that, I tweeted that that was also a lie. Donald Trump knew he was caught in that lie, but he also knew that I was the only one who caught him. And so he never said it again. For less than 24 hours, Donald Trump lied about losing friends on 9/11 and then never said it again for fear of being caught by all the major news organizations in that despicable lie. Donald Trump lost 0 friends on 9/11. Donald Trump attended 0 9/11 funerals, 0. But Donald Trump tried to steal the grief of all the families who lost someone on 9/11. He tried to steal the grief of all the thousands and thousands of people who lost loved ones and dear friends and co-workers on 9/11. Donald Trump tried to steal their grief so that he could exploit that grief as his own in a political campaign debate. Presidential historians search for clues to the character of American presidents. Future historians will find nothing that illuminates the depravity of Donald Trump more vividly than his lie that he lost hundreds of friends on 9/11, a lie so vile that even Donald Trump is afraid to repeat it. We are 5 minutes away from polls closing in the California recall election of Governor Gavin Newsom. Earlier today, Governor Newsom spoke with NBC News' Jacob Soboroff.
I'm really proud of the progress we're making as a state, our resilience, our ability to be led by science, open argument, and I have the backs of every Californian, even those that voted for this recall, because I care about them. They care about their families, they care about their loved ones and their communities, and I have a responsibility, each and every one of them as well.
Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass of California. She's a member of the House Judiciary Committee. And Congresswoman Bass, the exit polls look good for the governor. All the pre-election polling looked good for the governor, but it is a recall. It's very difficult to poll. It's very difficult to predict. We are minutes away from getting huge dumps of votes. The mail-in ballots will be reported very early. What is your expectation tonight?
Well, my expectation is that we'll know something pretty quick. You know, today is the day the election ends. We've actually been voting for weeks. And so I do think that we should know something pretty quickly. And I feel good about it. I'm excited. You know, we were worried a few months ago that Democrats weren't really motivated, but I think Larry Elder helped motivate people. And because the choice is very clear, sanity or insanity.
Larry Elder clearly is not going to concede. He won't be giving a speech tonight or ever saying that he lost this election and that Gavin Newsom was properly maintained in office by the voters of California through their choice. What does that mean to California politics, to American politics generally, that Republican candidates now will not ever concede defeat?
Well, I think that it is showing us consistently across the nation that they are trying to fundamentally undermine our democracy. You know, in California, we have over 60 recalls going. People can barely take office before they're being recalled. This is the 6th attempt to recall this governor. And so what I'm concerned about, and I think we need to look at, is this a strategy in a blue state where you'll just grind government to a halt through the tactic of using recalls? We really need to take a step back and examine this process. But what I am very hopeful is that tomorrow we will begin discussion about reforming this process, because it is very broken.
In July, this looked very risky for Gavin Newsom. The polling was very, very close. It looked like it could have been possibly a Democratic Party strategic mistake not to have a recognizable Democratic name on the list of alternatives to the governor, just in case the recall passed. The Democratic voters had basically no one to vote for on that ballot. But it seems as though the governor will be able to hold on by a substantial margin, according to what we're learning in exit polls so far. But what does it mean to Democratic Party politics generally? Are there lessons here for the Democrats in California?
Well, I do think there are. And the number one lesson is that we have to reform this process, because basically you have to get a certain number of signatures, right? But this has now developed into a business. So all you have to have is a couple of major donors, and you can get signatures to put anything on a ballot in California, not just a recall, but also ballot initiatives that make no sense. So we're going to spend close to $300 million when, Lawrence, the election for the governor, the re-election, is 9 months away. If you don't like him, then vote him out at the re-election. But again, if you know you can't vote him out, you need something like a recall to have happen. And that's why the entire process needs to be examined and reformed.
There's been a lot of talk recently about you possibly running for mayor of Los Angeles. Do you have a timetable for making a decision about that?
Well, I will tell you, Lawrence, this was not something that I was thinking about, but I am giving it serious consideration now, because we have a very bad humanitarian crisis going on in Los Angeles, with over 40,000 people in the city, 60,000 if you include the county, who are living on the streets. And I'm very worried, especially after my last 4 years in Washington. I want to see us bring this city together, not tear it apart with the type of divisiveness that has taken place in this recall. So beginning tomorrow, we need to first reform the process, because frankly, no one's going to run for office. As soon as you get elected, you get recalled before you're even able to move in. So that's going to be my first order of business, but I will make a decision soon.
Congresswoman Karen Bass, we're less than a minute away from polls close in California. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
That is tonight's last word, and we are now 30 seconds away from the polls closing in California. Stay tuned for more coverage of the California recall election on MSNBC. We will have actual returns very soon. The 11th hour with Brian Williams starts now.